I knew that this would be the hard part. I knew that actually hitting the post button was going to be the most challenging part of this whole process.
Welcome to the Love Siren Podcast, your weekly dose of enchantment for the modern romantic. I'm Dahlia, your queer, poly, feminist witch, guiding you into your most magnetic, irresistible siren self. If you're craving ocean-deep love, delicious confidence, and results that last, you've just unlocked the right portal. Thank you so much for being here. Let's get into it.
I keep on having nightmares about my face being stolen, which I know is my subconscious trying to process the fear around AI and the fear around putting myself out there on social media. And I think it's really tough because there's a lot of evidence that supports this anxiety. And so it can be really challenging to try to combat it with like my normal CBT kind of tools. But this is also something that I have committed myself to show up for. And I am refusing to back down from that commitment to myself. And I really want this to be inspiration for you if you are feeling scared of something. I hope that you feel like you can push through some of that fear, even when that fear is justified, because right now the world is like especially scary. I have so much sympathy for paranoid schizophrenics that are like, we're being monitored at all times. I'm like, yeah, I think you're right. This episode, I really want to talk about peace because the amount of peace that I have for this life that I have cultivated for myself is unmatched. And I took a lot of really big risks to get to this place. And I don't know that many people who experience the same level of confidence and security within themselves to know that they will be fine with whatever comes at them, that it's something that I'm just so hungry to talk to you about. Like, I'm never going to be a content creator that's like, I made $100,000 this month. Let me show you how. But I am going to be a creator that is like, I am so happy. Let me show you how. I am desperate to show you how. I brought up anxiety at the beginning of this episode because one of the things that has been gnawing at me every time I think about creating reels and putting myself out there is I can't stop thinking about my ex-partner of 10 years and how he is probably laughing at the fact that I am a full-time witch. Because I know that these are not my thoughts. I know that I feel very concrete that this is what I am supposed to do, at least in this chapter of my life. I know that there's more that I'm supposed to be doing, but right now I feel so confident that this is where I'm supposed to be. And it's crazy how absolutely aligned it is. Like, a filmmaker for 8 years, I did comedy for 2 years, I've been in the spiritual space for 5 years. I was a teenage witch and then had a huge atheist phase and then came back to witchcraft. I left my monogamous relationship so that way I could explore my queer and polyamorous side. Like, all of these things have led me to be able to build this and pass this on. And I feel so blessed. I feel so excited. And I just feel so correct. And yet I still have this voice in the back of my mind that is like, you are silly. And it's not my voice. I know that that's not my voice. Sometimes I'm silly on purpose, but that's not what we're getting at. I have been pouring so much of myself, my time, my energy, my money into this, and it feels incredible and intoxicating. And I can't wait to help people. I cannot wait to help you find delicious and healthy love. And I'm so happy. I'm stressed, but I'm so happy. And to think that there is a version of me that had deprived myself because I was still with this partner that I knew was not a good fit for me, it breaks my heart to think about, because I know that this is right. And this isn't to shame him. Like, he is allowed to have those opinions. It's just a bummer that I have internalized so much of his opinions, even still, even after we've been broken up for years, we haven't spoken in a very long time, he's not in my life. He still is in my brain, and that stinks. Obviously, this is very vulnerable for me to bring all of this stuff up, but I do feel like it's important because even though it's my ex-partner's voice that's in my head, you might relate to this feeling from a parent or an old teacher or an old bully. And one of my favorite parts about being a witch is that I'm able to then transmute all of these thoughts and fuel them for this business. I'm able to fuel them to help propel me forward into the goals that I have. And I'm just so glad that I had the courage to listen to myself, which brings me to the very first item on my list of how I cultivate peace in my life: listening to myself. When I was first on this spiritual journey, and I kept on hearing the advice to listen to yourself, and I was kind of like, of course I listen to myself. Like, I sometimes feel like my thoughts are so loud that it's almost impossible to listen to myself. Oops, editing Dahlia here. I meant to say that my thoughts are so loud that it's almost impossible to not listen to myself. But the more that I thought about it, the more that I really understood, because there's a lot of benefit in our society to not listen to yourself. I'm sure that you have experienced somebody being not very good for you, but you just chose to keep your mouth shut and ignore that piece of you because it felt better to be loved by that person. We can experience this a lot, especially growing up. And I think what's so tough about that is when a caregiver's love is dependent on you stifling yourself, that's also tied to safety, right? Like, your caregiver gives you shelter, gives you food. For most of us, we were trained very early to need to stifle what we thought to be able to keep that safety alive. And so it can be really hard to retrain how you hear yourself, because if you ignore yourself, then that means safety. I have some homework for you. These are some journaling prompts. I will put them in the description, but I just wanted to give you some of my favorites. What am I pretending not to know? Where in my life am I currently ignoring my own feelings? If no one could judge me, what would I admit I actually want? When was the last time I had a gut feeling and ignored it? What happened? What does my body feel like when something is a yes for me? What does my body feel like when something is a no? You might have immediate answers to some of these, and some of them you might be like, oh my God, I've never even thought of that. Especially for me, when I was first on this journey, I felt so detached from my body. And so with those feelings of yeses and nos and gut feelings, I was just kind of like, I actually need to decipher what that feels like. And it took a while. So I just want you to sit with them. And there are more in the description, like I said. Okay, we're moving on to number 2, which is boundaries. I feel like I need to just rename this podcast because I'm pretty sure that every single episode I'm going to be talking about boundaries. But also, I used to be terrible at boundaries, and I see how terrible other people are at boundaries. And I feel like I just gotta hammer this home. So before we continue, I want to talk about the difference between boundaries and rules. My favorite example of this is if you yell at me, then I am leaving the house. That is a boundary. Versus you are not allowed to yell at me, which is a rule. Both of them have effectively the same outcome, which is that theoretically no one is yelling at me. But one of them is 100% my actions, and the other one is putting the actions on the other person. And this is where I feel like boundaries can feel so empowering, because it's not that I'm telling you what to do. What I am saying is these are the consequences on if you choose to violate this boundary of mine. And so it means that when somebody does violate that boundary, I have an immediate protocol of like, if that, then this system in place. It also means that I am so crystal clear on what I am willing to tolerate versus not willing to tolerate. And that means that the moment I start to smell something that feels off, that incites that adrenaline, that fight flight response inside of me, then it is a signal for me to figure out how I want to proceed. I love having incredibly strong, sharp boundaries because it means that I can be as soft and sweet as I want on the inside, because I know that I have this fortress around me. Something that my queerness taught me is not to carry other people's emotions anymore. When you're socialized femmes, you can be brought up to believe that everyone's emotional well-being is your responsibility. This is something that I've experienced. This is something that a lot of my friends experience. It might not be universal, but it's still worth bringing up. One of the things that I really embody is you're an adult, you're in charge of your own feelings. I will tell you if I need or want something, and you're in charge of telling me if that is too much or you can't do it or whatever it is. It also means that when somebody says something where I do a double take and I'm like, wait, was that a shitty comment? My immediate thought right after is, it's none of my business. If they have something that they want to say, they can say it. And in the meantime, I'm just not going to worry about it. Because what is the worst that happens? Either they get so frustrated that I'm not picking up on their passive aggression and then they have an actual conversation with me, or they say something shitty that makes me cut them out of my life. Like, either way, I get to a conclusion with actual facts instead of assumptions. Okay, number 3 on my list is amazing friends. The first thing that you need to know about me is I categorize my friends into varsity, junior varsity, bench, and fans. So varsity is like best friends. They are family. I know so many queer people can relate to the idea of building your own family, and that is very much what varsity is to me. Junior varsity is friends, really lovely, solid people. Just, I might not have the closest relationship, or maybe I can't rely on them as much as I can rely on my varsity people or whatever it is. Bench are people who are lovely, but tend to be more on the flaky side or something along those lines. I sometimes will forget that people are on bench because I'm like, oh my God, you're so much fun. I love hanging out with you. Let's go get coffee. And then they'll flake on me and I'll be like, right. I forgot. And so the way that I deal with bench people is if there's something that I know for a fact that I'm going to, or there's like a party or something like that, I always invite my bench people. Like, I'm like, I like you so much, but I'm not going to risk my time on you because my time is so precious to me. Even the time that I'm spending just like on the couch scrolling, every single second of my life is so precious to me that I refuse to be flaked on. The last category is fans, which is really just for me. I don't know if this is very helpful for the average person, but because I've been doing art since I was 18 years old, I have these people in my life who admire my work, and I interact with them pretty consistently, and they're always so supportive of the work that I do, and I always make sure to be very appreciative back to them. But I feel like most people probably don't really relate to that, but I feel like it's still important to say that that's part of my categorization, where I have these people in my life that purely consume my content and I give thanks in return. This categorization system was shamelessly stolen by my best friend Sam, so shout out to him. Okay, so this is going to be a very weird side tangent, but I just need you to stick with me for a little bit. I grew up in Massachusetts, and one of my favorite things about Massachusetts is there is constantly furniture on the side of the road. And so I'm going to take a dining room table set as an example. So if I move into a new apartment, I have very little money. I am going to search around my neighborhood and see if I can find a table and chairs. They probably don't match. That's okay. I just need something functional. And so from there, I'm able to keep my eyes peeled. Like, my basic needs are met. I have table, I have chairs. I'm able to eat at the table, I'm able to work at the table, whatever it is. But I'm able to look around, and if I see chairs that are better than the ones that I have, maybe they've got some padding associated with them, I'm like, perfect. So I get those chairs and I bring those home. I have immediately upgraded. And then let's say I find a better table. Maybe I had a square table and I find a round table, and round table is actually what I was looking for. So I'm like, perfect, great. Then we take in the round table. And then maybe, just maybe, I find an immaculate, like brand new dining set table with chairs that have padding, the perfect circular table. I take it home. I get this incredible dining set for free. And I'm able to continuously keep upgrading because I know what I have. So when I'm on the side of the road and I see chairs that I'm like, no, actually, I think the ones that I have are better than the ones that these are, I can leave them on the side of the road for somebody else who needs them. I'm not in this scarcity where I feel like I'll never find chairs ever again, so I should take these home, because I already have chairs. I already have chairs that I love. I just think that these ones aren't for me, and that's okay. It's okay that they're not for me. They're going to be for somebody else who needs them. And I really see my friends as the same. And I'm not saying that my friends are furniture, especially because I'm sure you're listening. Thank you so much for listening. But what I am saying is that I can feel when somebody is a chair that I'm like, yes, I'm going to upgrade you into my varsity camp, or I'm going to keep you in my JV camp, or I'm going to downgrade you to bench. That's really the metaphor that I'm trying to get at. For the most part, when I meet people, they start in junior varsity, and from there they move. Most of the time, I would say that they stay in JV. I feel like I'm really lucky that I attract excellent people, but sometimes they move down to bench, sometimes they move up to varsity, which is fantastic. There's also people that I assumed would be varsity forever, and no ill will on either side. It just didn't work out that way. I mean, I have moved so many times. And, it can be hard. There are time zones to take into consideration. People have kids, and it changes everything. So the number 4 way that I cultivate peace in my life is thinking about things in a hierarchical way. So being hierarchical, Polly, means a relationship structure where certain relationships are prioritized over others. I do practice this, but not everyone does, and that's totally fine. The thing that I want to say is that the number 1 slot is always me. Always. Number 2 slot is going to be Love Siren Witchery. And then from there, I have a hierarchy of different people. I always want to prioritize not just my partners, but my friends. I want to prioritize people in a very similar way. Even if I'm not in a romantic relationship with my friends, I still see them in the same category as my romantic relationships. I still take them so deeply into consideration when I'm building my life. But the number one slot is always me. I fill my own cup first, and then everybody else can have what comes after that. I see people all the time not have themselves in the number one slot, and it's so obvious to me, especially the femmes in my life. And it can be really hard, especially because I felt really selfish when I started to put myself first. And now I cannot imagine going back. Number 5 is limiting the amount of things that I don't want to do, which goes into making sure that my cup is full. I think one of the weird manifestation exaggerations is that you can never do anything that is out of alignment for you. And I just don't think that that is realistic. Like, there's always going to be things that are annoying. There are always going to be people that are annoying. But if you don't experience that strife, you are not going to grow. But more than that, being a good community member is still including people that you might find annoying. Because otherwise, you are going to end up really lonely. I will certainly prep myself if I know that there's going to be an annoying person at an event, somebody that I just don't get along with, which is perfectly fine. I will prep myself before, maybe I'll prep myself after. Some examples of prepping myself before I hang out with someone who I think is a bit on the annoying side would be things like grounding myself, doing a meditation to make sure that my center is unshakable. And things after would be things like taking a shower and just like fully cleansing myself of their energy. Or if you don't have time to do a shower, you can also create a protective bubble around you. And if you imagine a cord from yourself to them, just imagine that cord being severed and all of their energy gets brought back to them and all of your energy gets brought back to you. I'm sure that you have experienced an annoying relative or coworker or my favorite, a friend's spouse that you just have to deal with them. And the thing that I really want you to know is that there is so much more in your control than you think there is. I want to go back to my earlier point about having their opinion be none of your business. It's such a powerful way to take your brain back, especially if you're a kind, empathic, and creative person. It can be so normal to create a situation and stories in your head on what is going on. And I want to give you permission that you can play dumb. I remember I had one coworker who said to me, "You're so lucky that you don't care what other people think." And I said, "Thank you." And I took it as such a compliment on purpose. I knew that she was being mean, but I said, "Oh, thank you so much. That means a lot to me." Because I'm like, you don't get to have that power. I know that that's true. I really hope that it made her realize that that was not a nice thing to say, but I took it as a compliment anyway. One of my favorite strategies for dealing with people that I don't get along with is pretending that I'm an alien, and I just get incredibly curious as to why they feel that way. Why do they believe what they believe? And I start to get down into the crevices. And I will often give examples of my life of what I believe, even just to give an example of how we're different, or maybe, just maybe, give them a path to think differently than what they're thinking now. If they want to, they don't have to. It's none of my business. I think also people can feel a lot of pressure to be polite. They can feel a lot of pressure to stay in situations where they feel uncomfortable. And I want you to remember that you can leave anytime. And you can also make it a big deal if you really want to. If somebody is being mean to you, if they're being like a mean girl where they're being passive aggressive, you can say, I'm not going to deal with this anymore, and just leave. It's okay if they think you're being dramatic. It's okay if they think that you're being unreasonable. Again, they're allowed to think that, and you are allowed to protect your peace. I also want to make sure that I say that if you are someone who struggles with boundaries, if you struggle to know what your yeses and your nos are, my one on one coaching might be perfect for you because I really hold your hand to help you figure this stuff out. It's all well and good to consume this material and be like, oh, yeah, this is something that I should think about, rather than actually doing the work and being asked the questions that bring you to that conclusion. I offer a free discovery call to make sure that it's a good fit on both of our ends, and I really can't wait to work with you. I might come back with a part two, but I do want to leave this here. I am very curious to know what you think. I'm also so curious to know what you do to cultivate the peace in your life. I don't want you to forget about your homework. The Love Siren commands you. I want you to know that I am so proud of you. Even just listening to this episode means that you are taking these big steps to try to make your life better, and that is something to commend yourself on. I can't wait to talk to you soon, and I hope you have a beautiful, beautiful day. And I'll see you in the next episode.